Welcome back to Left Unattended. The podcast exists to normalize real stories of neurodivergence in the workplace, whether that be the triumphs, the struggles, the masking, the misunderstandings, and what happens when people stop defining themselves by what makes them different and start understanding how they actually work. Today, I'm joined by Tracy Austin, founder of Elevated Talent Consulting and creator of the And Both method. I'd love to hear more about that. Tracy has spent more than 20 years in HR and leadership development, helping organizations design people strategies that work in real life. She's also diagnosed with ADHD and brings a powerful perspective on strengths, workplace fit, team design, and why we need to stop defining people by diagnosis. We're going to dive into ADHD, high achievement, the wrong questions we ask at work, and what happens when a person's strengths finally meet the right environment. Welcome, Tracy.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I always talk about there's the credentialed version of our bio. Is there anything else you want the listeners to know about who Tracy is?
I think what's important with a credentialed version is what actually shows up in partnership with a client, right? So the credentials don't actually mean anything if they're not producing the outcomes with the client. And the other side of that is, and I think for us to also own, it's why do we have those credentials? Yes, they can be important, but also, why are they there? And I've got a fun story about that as well that I didn't realize was a fun story until I was in a workshop with an executive team last week. So,
do tell. Feel free.
So I do a lot of 5 behaviors training, which is Patrick Lencioni's. And one of the questions that is in there is, tell me about kind of your personal history and how that personal history impacted who you are. And one of the participants had said, she's I really distrust people with a lot of credentials. Well, I have a lot of things after my last name, right? And so she said that, and I got really curious with her. And I was like, well, tell me about that. And so, as the facilitator, I don't always kind of name mine, but I said, I want to share something because it was just a light bulb for me as to why and what that is. And I said, so I was held back in kindergarten. So I did kindergarten twice. And the reason that I was told I did kindergarten twice was, first, it was, hey, she's not keeping up with her classmates as far as the academics, but it was also the social aspect of, maybe it's just not getting along or all these things. Well, I was never brought into the conversations. It was just, hey, you're being held back. You didn't make the cut. Well, that creates all this scarring, right?
Yep.
And then with that, then the next year, so year 2 of kindergarten, it was, well, we're going to place her in all these gifted and talented programs because she's way ahead of everybody else. Long story short, what have I done my entire life? Tried to prove that I deserved to be in the room. So, my MPA, my SPHR, my SHRM SCP, I can go on and on. There's several. But none of that doesn't matter, maybe, but why did it matter to me? Because I was trying to prove something because I didn't see the worth in myself. Yeah. And, it's any of these we talk about, which is why it's why are we talking about the diagnoses versus what is our actual thought about that diagnosis and what do we want to do with it?
Yeah, which kind of leads me to the first question, because you said your ADHD diagnosis was incredibly insightful for you, but you don't believe the diagnosis defines you. How do you hold both of those truths?
Yeah, absolutely. You already hit on the end both, which we'll get into, which is so fun, right? And so I think the beauty of diagnoses is you can understand what's behind it. And as you said, kind of, we were talking ahead of time and you're like, hey, I just want people to know that they're not alone, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was that. It was why do I drive so hard to get these things done? And I can produce a tremendous amount when I'm focused. But man, that focus window is this big unless there's a deadline. And it can't be a false deadline. It can't be a fake deadline. Yeah. But when there's a real deadline,
see right through that, right?
You've got to go present to 400 people in 2 hours. Oh man, what I can turn on and tap into.
Yeah.
I can't tap into it any other time. And that is a gift as long as you see it as a gift. But as a society teaches us is that's procrastination, that's bad, you shouldn't be doing, and all those things. It's well, if I actually just take a step back and say, hey, I can understand myself within this, and I know what works for me, instead of trying to fight against how I'm naturally wired, say, hey, I want to harness that. How do we harness it and take care of the people around me.
Yeah. I always thought it was something I teach when I do speaking as well, is like the difference between laziness, procrastination, and an executive dysfunction, because they're vastly different between the three, even though they all look exactly like, right?
Correct.
So laziness is like, I just don't care if it gets done and I don't want to do it, right? Procrastination is I want to do it, but I'm okay waiting until the last moment. And executive function for me is like, I want to do it, I need to do it, and my body just won't let me do the thing. And I think and even though they look alike, it's so different. So,
well, and do we do all three of them? The answer is yes. Right?
Well, 100% we do all three of them. Not every one of them is executive dysfunction, right? Like, and not every one of them is lazy. And it's always a spectrum for sure. Yeah, that's why curiosity, to your point earlier, when you were getting curious about why somebody feels a certain way about credentials, like curiosity is really your best. It's kind of the answer to a lot of conflict, I think.
Oh, 100%. Because when we get curious, it takes us out of the kind of like the digging the heels in of knowing, well, I know that this is the only way to do it, right? Well, it's like when we're curious, we're allowing the other the other multiple competing priorities to have a little bit of bandwidth so that we can start collaborating. So like that curiosity, I believe, is the key to collaboration.
Yeah. And it's so cliche, but it's so powerful, right? Like I hear everybody say, curiosity and leadership, but it really is, when you do the actual curiosity, it opens up so much opportunity and conversation in how you see people and perspectives and everything. So I love that.
And I think that that's some of the and both, right? It's like, well, can I be right? And can that other person be right as well? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Like, it's like that 6-9 thing where somebody's standing on one side and one's standing on the other. Well, one sees a 6, one sees a 9, right? Like we kind of giggle at that. And that happens all of the time in what we're doing. And so much of it is based on where we're sitting and what's important to us based on our role and based on our experiences. Now, that doesn't make somebody else less than. But what it does is it creates a huge opportunity for how do we connect on this, and how do we also ground into the outcomes that what we're actually looking for.
You described your ability to hyperfocus, because you touched on that a little bit, and to dive deeply, see things from like a high level, connecting dots, and hold a lot of information without getting overwhelmed. How has that kind of shaped your leadership in your work?
It's definitely a superpower, right? And that superpower also, every strength has that opportunity, right? I mean, there's a double-edged sword to it. So, but the key is you have to have the right team around you. And I think so often we're so me-focused and so ego-focused that we forget that all of us have something incredible to bring to it. And the key is, how do we bring that team together in order to do it? So it's like, when we look at teams in an organization, if we're only looking at the jobs and the individuals, and we don't look at how do we pull this together, that's where many teams fail, because we don't have an executor on that team. We don't have a detail person on that team. I don't have those two skills naturally. Can I manufacture them? Sure. Does it cost me a lot in my energy to do it? It sure does. And that is, I think, what becomes really fun when we start asking questions, and this is where it's like, for your listeners, if you're in a work situation where you're like, I hate it, I want you to really think about and say, all right, what about the situation do you absolutely love? What about the situation do you like? And what about the situation would you like to change? Because in all three of those, what we're doing is we're giving ourselves opportunities. If we say we hate it, it shuts our mind down right away, and we stop looking for ways to make it better.
It's like the stop, start, continue kind of version of that. Yeah.
Right.
So how do you think that, or how do you know when you're using your superpower for good?
It depends upon what the outcome is, right? So for example, like I don't typically work from home. You want to know why? Because I am so darn distracted when I'm at home, and that superpower becomes like laundry and cleaning and gardening. And I am so fixated on how beautiful my flowers are, and not the 15 things that's on my commitment list. You notice I didn't say to-do list, but what did I commit to today? And if I believe that I am my word with what I'm going to do, what have I committed to? I know that that superpower then, if I'm at home, is going to be so distracting, which is why I work out of a shipping container.
Is that a shipping container behind you?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So I'm in one. There's one behind me. Like there's a whole bunch of shipping containers around here. However, like we need to know ourselves of where we focus well, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't work well in a coffee shop because I'm like, who's talking? What are those conversations, right? And we've got to know who we are and exactly what that is in order to really tap into what that superpower is, because it can definitely be used for way other things, but there's a time and a place for it. There's a time and a place where, man, that superpower in gardening is amazing.
And then it's like when you want to tap into it and it's like, oh, I want to do my gardening now. And it just, my body won't let me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is also like, hey, how do we create our environment? Right. And so, I hear from a lot of folks that are like, well, yeah, but Tracy, I can't create my environment because I work in XYZ environment. And here's where, I believe that there's an and both. And so I'm like, well, tell me about your environment. Well, they're like, well, it's 9 to 5. It's in this type of environment. Well, what do you need? Well, I need a quiet space where I am not interrupted for 3 hours so I can get these key things done. I said, okay, what would it take for you to get that? Well, I guess I would need to ask for it and I need to make sure my day is prioritized ahead of time. Okay. So what's stopping you from asking for that? Well, I don't think I can.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Right. So like, let's look at our K-12 system in the US. Can I go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
Hey, can I, right? And then we get into the working world and now all of a sudden it's like, I'm expecting you to go figure it out, ask questions.
Yeah.
But the questions aren't, can I go to the bathroom? The questions are, hey, I'm struggling to figure out how does, this report connect to this piece of data to get to the result we're looking for. So now all of a sudden we're expecting folks to give themselves permission to be creative and critical thinkers when we've taught them for the last 13 years to raise their hand to do anything.
Oh, you're like preaching to the choir here, because like I wrote a book about how I think, in my opinion, our school systems and our workplaces are very much evolved from like industrial time era when we had factory line workers and we treated people that way. And so like I always think about the trolley scenario, if you're familiar, and like how like accommodations are looked at as, we set up our workplaces for the many, but not include the few. And so how can we kind of move towards universal design? So I love that you said that.
And it's like, if we think about that, our school systems are not created for all of the different, neurodiversities that are out there. And here's the thing, with any diversity, if we sit down and have a conversation with them, it's really about the person that is behind whatever that diversity is. Yeah. And I think that is where, when we can start seeing each other as humans and as incredible members of a team that is committed to a specific result, now all of a sudden we can drop some of these things, because labels can be very harmful and helpful. Like, labels can be helpful to say, oh, now I understand. And now I know how to play with it, right? Like there's 2 books on ADHD, and one was I'm Not Stupid, Lazy or something. And then the other one was about females and ADHD and how it works different and why so many females were undiagnosed until they're 35, until their late 30s and early 40s, right?
Yeah.
And what was incredibly helpful about both of those to me was like, I get it. Then I don't think I've actually ever come out and said, hey, I've been, diagnosed with ADHD outside of this conversation. And what's interesting about that is once I understood it, I didn't need it anymore, because now I could give myself permission to be who I was and give myself what I needed.
Yeah, I think what I really like that, and this is what I caution clients for, is you can have a label, but not make it your whole identity. Right.
Correct.
So I always caution people who get a new diagnosis, because we want to go down the self-discovery rabbit hole, as I call it. And what I see some of my clients do is like, then they start taking on traits that are not naturally theirs, that they had never seen before. And I work with clients to help kind of unmask and find their own identity and autonomy. And it's harder to figure out like I call it label looping. It's harder to figure out if you're taking on a new identity because you've read about it and your mask is put on so tight that now you think you have to do ADHD or autism or dyslexia a certain way, in which you're now picking up habits, or are we actually uncovering some of the, or peeling off the mask and uncovering some of these traits that were naturally there? We don't actually know. So I really caution people against, like, don't read too much about it. Understand where it comes from, but don't make it your whole identity.
Right. And I think, part of this is I will do kind of like the Netflix style binge.
Yeah.
And then I'm done and I'll never look at it again.
One of the things I really liked in your submission is that you talked about how you feel workplaces are having the wrong conversation with the wrong question. I think that's how you worded it.
Yeah.
Like, what questions should we be asking? What conversations should we be having?
So often we're having these backwards conversations like, well, why did you do that? What, and it's all this negative, right?
Yeah.
Versus really diving into what are we committed to? Like, what is the outcome that we want on this project? What is the intention of this? What is the intention of each person on the team? And so we're not so focused on clarity and accountability. We're focused on blame and shame. And that is a key distinction, and I work with leadership teams is predominantly who we work with is mid-level leadership and executive leadership teams. And so often we're so focused on who we can point the finger at that didn't do it, that we're totally overlooking, hey, what is each kind of unique ability that is in this team that each individual has? And how do we start aligning these together to ensure that, hey, we're not assigning Tracy detailed pieces that's going to burn her out. Let's assign that to Tiffany because Tiffany's really, really good at it. And, it gives her energy to do this and follow through with it. Where the energy that Tracy, like I'm a 10 quick start. Like if we look at some of the, is that one Colby? I don't even know which one that is. But like there are things that tell us, like it's one of them, right? But there are things that tell us certain things. And what that tells me is I move really, really fast. I can come up with an idea, get it started, unblock it, but I have to hand it off to somebody else to implement it because I will not get it done, right?
Yes.
And so, but when we can understand that about ourselves, now we can start asking the right questions of where we're going versus playing whack-a-mole on everybody's weaknesses to prove how awful they are versus really showing we have each other's back and we're committed to doing it. And sometimes it means we need to pull somebody up from the bench because we don't have that trait on our team.
I love that. It's sort of like the saying, like, don't ask a fish to climb a tree, right?
Right.
It's like if we're just leaning into someone's weaknesses, or it's not gonna go well. I always like to think, like, what's the hidden cost of what we're doing? Like, what cognitive load are we taking on from a neurodiversity standpoint? Like, how much of our capacity are we overreaching? I always think about, we have a performance floor, right? Or if somebody goes below a performance level, they get a performance improvement plan, they get a performance conversation. We have all these like structured ways of talking to someone about performance when it goes below the floor. But what are we doing to when somebody hits over the ceiling? Do we even have a ceiling? Because I really think that's where somebody like you or I, where we've got credentials galore because we're trying to prove something to probably our third grade teacher who told us we'll never live up to our potential. It's like, at what point do we allow people to continue to work over capacity and burn them out? Because I see in the veterinary profession, I see people work over capacity and they think the next job is just going to be the answer. The next job is going to have a better culture. The next job is going to, and really what it is, they're just working over that capacity threshold and unsupported.
Yeah. So, I think that there's a couple things here that I see. And one of them is I have a career goal setting workshop. And what I do in there is I have them actually go map out their career. And in each of those is what was the must-haves, the like-to-haves, and the love-to-haves in each of those, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, once that's mapped out, they can really start to see, because those must-haves in that first job are probably now never-haves. Like if, it's like I did payroll for my first 7 years. And like for me which is a very detail-oriented thing. However, I was in a season of life where I wanted to learn and learn and learn because I knew that there was a certain level I wanted to get within HR, and payroll was a piece of that. Benefits was a piece of that, all those detail-oriented things. But I was in a season of life where I'm like, I'm going to overcome this because I was so committed to getting those things done. Now, did I add a certification with every single one of them? Yep, I sure did.
Why?
I absolutely did. You know, like that good old payroll certification.
I don't even list half of my credentials anymore because I'm like, it is not relevant anymore. Let's just let it go.
But here's why it was important.
Yeah.
Is it allowed me to master it so that I no longer had to do it.
Yes.
And within that, you know, so when folks go through and they do the must have, love to have kind of things, it shows them how they're growing. And the key here is you need to take off as much as you're adding on so that we're not necessarily overworking that. And here's the thing for employee engagement. Employee engagement at the highest level is that apex of where the organization's goals are aligned with the individual's personal and career goals. And so how we do that is we have the individual, you know, career pathway, but then we have, you know, our people strategy pathway, which is essentially what does it look like to elevate through the organization, right? What are those outcomes? What are some of those credentials? What are some of those, like the people skills that are needed within that? Now that becomes the coaching conversations that specifically happen as we're working with employees. And this is what we develop, you know, with our clients, right? Is we're developing these pieces. And what that does is now folks can see this is actually how I elevate. And when we have real conversations around what our natural behaviors are, like we use predictive index, and there's lots out there, but we like PI, so we use predictive index because I love the coaching guys in PI and I love the manager strategy guys that says, hey, here as your manager, how am I doing managing you the way you need to be managed? And now I can say, you know what, you interrupt me 17 times a day and it takes me 2 hours to get back to work every time, and I'm guilty of interrupting somebody 17 times a day. But once I knew that was stopping the people that I was supporting from being successful, ding ding ding, now I'm self-aware enough that I can shift that. Right.
I have to create a mechanism for ourselves, right? Because I think about like me as the constant interrupter is because if I don't say it, I'll forget it. And so that was the reason for my constant interruption. So how can we create a mechanism of action that works for me to, I don't know, for me, that's like scheduling a Slack post at like 2 hours from now or during a time where my teammate's free, and then scheduling maybe 16 of them if I have to, versus sending, you know, firing them off as my thoughts go.
Exactly. And that, you know, so I've conflated two things here, and I want to make sure that I pull them back out so that folks are following along. One of them, you know, that we kind of started with is, hey, how do we keep our questions focused forward? And then how, which I think we addressed. And then that second piece was really looking at how do we also ensure that we're creating this upward potential versus always going backwards with the negative potential. Right. And so that's how we're creating it. And one of the best tools I love, like I said, is PI, because now we've got the coaching guide that we have the self-awareness to the leader to lead them the way they need to be led. And when we do that, it creates a two-way conversation for folks to start naming and asking what they need. But the accountability goes both ways. I can, you know, now start scheduling my Slack post for you. And I need you to reprioritize your day at the beginning of the day because there's still things that are needed in a business day that can't wait a week from now because it was, you know, you follow first in, first out, and I need based on business priorities.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. One of the things I want to pick your brain at, because I have changed and flip-flopped my idea on like culture fit. So you had talked about some culture fit here. And so early in my consulting career, it was very much the adage of poor fit, high skill, fire fast. And those are like our high performers, but they're not a fit for the culture. You should fire quickly. I have since, like in the work that I've done, I feel like there's even more curiosity that has to get done, because in my mind, if they were hired, they were a culture fit to begin with. And so something had to have changed in order for you not to be a culture fit. And so like, I want to get even more curious if somebody is no longer a culture fit in my business. So I'm curious, like, where is your stance on that? Because I hear reasons for both, and I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I think we're giving organizations way too much credit if we think that most organizations are actually hiring for culture. I'm just going to name that. Like, however, what I will say is if organizations are truly hiring for culture, I think that there is a piece here where we have to get really curious about what some of those are and have some of the conversations. I will name, I was hired into an organization that it was the perfect dream role. The organization was a horrible, horrible fit for me because they were very, very regimented, and they needed to be based on who they were in the industry that they were in. Not a fit for me, especially the way that my, salary was set up, the way all those things were. I didn't have the autonomy to go out and do kind of the maverick things that I do because everything had to go through 3 or 4 layers of approval. And I'm like, I can't work this way, right? And so some of that was the way I work, but some of it was also the culture. And so, I think a key piece is we as employees have to really do a great job of interviewing the organization for culture and what our personal values are as much as vice versa. And so I think that that's really important. Now, are there times where, hey, the culture just does not fit? Absolutely. Are there folks that need to become happy alumni? Yep, they sure do.
Yeah, no, I love that because it doesn't place onus one way or another. It really is like a playing field almost, and you've got to figure out. And that's where I think where the curiosity comes into play is because those broad stroke comments of like anybody who's a poor culture fit but high skill, like terminate, and the rest of your organization will feel better about it because they'll step up. I have such a hard feeling about that right now, especially when we've got people who are, neurodivergent and masking and trying really hard to be a culture fit, and they don't really know what it takes to be a culture fit, right? So
well, and I think this is where team comes in, right? And I don't think we do enough conversations around the importance of team, because where a team really comes in is no one person is meant to do it all. We weren't designed that way, so each of us has different strengths. Well, a team really is meant to allow us to turn up every single person's strengths. A lot of times we're not aligning our teams to turn up all those strengths to align to the strategy that we're executing on a specific project or for a specific period of time. And, are there some culture pieces on how we talk to each other and what communication is and all those things? Absolutely. But I also believe that if we can really dig into that self-awareness piece, and if somebody is committed to being aware enough of their environment to be able to vulnerably name, hey, this isn't working for me because of XYZ. How do we go about fixing it? Or how do we go about, getting to this end outcome based on what our needs are? That's a very different conversation that starts to allow us to shift that. Now, if the culture doesn't allow that, then it might not be a culture fit. But I often think that we're jumping to conclusions before we've really gotten curious.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think about that all the time from the consulting space. It was very much jumping to conclusions, and I stickler for getting even more curious. Like I'll work with a client years ago and just like, but I want to know more. Like I don't feel like I have all the information to make that determination, and I don't want to use this quote unquote golden rule to make all my decisions, because there's no magic bullet that exists in my mind.
And I think there's a difference between clarity and being certain, right? There's a huge distinction between clarity and certainty. And certainty, we're never going to have certainty. We can have clarity. And I think that it's important what we're looking for. And if we're looking for clarity, we can find clarity, but we're never going to find certainty. And it's going to stop us from actually moving forward and hitting a goal.
I want to pick your brain so much for the next couple of hours if I could. So I named this podcast Left Unattended. And I ask every guest now, like, what does left unattended mean to you as far as your neurodivergence goes?
It's kind of like a 2-year-old with a scissor running around. It's like that. And here's what I mean by that is the only thing we can control is our thoughts, right?
Yes.
And, if my thoughts are all over the place and I don't create some system to focus on where I'm at, I'm like that 2-year-old running around with the scissors that's kind of like going like this, that's really going to hurt themselves and lots of folks around them. And so, the key is, what are the structures that we create? So instead of holding our scissors like this, do I have a pair of scissors? Oh, they're not pointy though. Like if I'm running around like this versus I'm holding my scissors like this, guess what? I have just created a structure to manage. And I don't think manage is always the right thing, because guess what? There are times where I want the pointy end out, for sure.
Oh yeah, most of the times we want the pointy end out.
Yeah, but I need to know when that is important and appropriate and when it is not, based on the circumstance and the situation and what's specifically needed.
I think what I'm taking is like, where do I have autonomy to hold my scissors?
Yeah, for true. I mean, there is some of that, but there's within also, the context, again, if the only thing that I can control is my thoughts, I also need to know which ones I just need to let go of.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the ticker that runs across the bottom of whatever news station you watch. They all have them.
Yeah.
Like that's my thoughts in my brain. I don't need to pull every single one of those out.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just need to let the thing run and thank it for running and let it go.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the things that I do with my clients, is neurodivergent clients, because we have a lot of rumination. We've got a lot of, I think the stats out there is a neurodivergent individual. I think the stats are actually an ADHD is an ADHD child by the time they hit 10 years of age has 20,000 more negative or directive comments than the non-neurodivergent child. And so we've got a lot of what I say an unsafe internal world that we have to not pick up all of those negative thoughts and not make them our whole identity. So I love that. Tracy, if the listeners want to get a hold of you, how can they find you? Where can they have a conversation with you?
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn at Elevated Talent Consulting, or Tracy Austin on LinkedIn. And then also our website is elevatedtalentconsulting.com. I have a podcast out there. We haven't updated it lately, but there's a lot of topics here that your listeners may be interested in that are out there as well.
Awesome. I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes for you.
Okay.
I think one of the things I'm taking from this conversation is that the goal is not to define people by their diagnosis. The goal is really to understand how people work, where they thrive, what support they need, and how their strengths fit within the larger team or the organization. And for neurodivergent professionals listening, I hope this creates a different question. So instead of asking what's wrong with me, maybe the better question is to ask is, where do my strengths, needs, values, and environment actually align? So 100%. Thanks, Tracy. And I really appreciate having you on here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Left Unattended. A huge thank you to my guest. And of course, thank you, Dustin Bays, for editing and making sure this podcast sounds as good as it feels. If today's conversation resonated with you, let's keep the connection going. Join my newsletter for weekly insights on neuro-inclusive leadership. And that's synapt.me/newsletter. That's syn-apt.me/newsletter. Learn more about coaching with me at synapt.me, syn-apt.me. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode, please follow the podcast and leave a review. It helps more people find these conversations. It reminds the world that belonging is not, it's a leadership strategy. Until then, I'm your host, Ron Sosa, and this has been Left Unattended. Until next time.